Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back. As you can see, we are back to our old friend Hollow Knight. Based on the emails I received, it just seemed that people were most okay with just continuing our analysis of Hollow Knight. So, let us get right back into it. Now, which file was it? I want to say it was this one. Alright, yeah, so this is where we last left off. So the last time when we were here, we were talking about how the game translated from being in this underground cave area to being this nature-esque sort of overrun area, because you can see that is clearly stone or laid brick, and that just doesn't happen naturally. So we seem to have an area that's just overwhelmed with nature, and that is a very stark contrast from the caves. The caves are just barren rocks and enemies that were, like, there was life, but it was infected. Here we're seeing, actual, not infected life grow in terms of nature with the leaves, the trees, the grass, life seems to be overflowing, for the most part. So, let's continue along our journey. So we have these archways, which again just signify that at one point there seems to have been life here. And remember, the Elder Book has told us that this place is really old, so it's really hard to determine, how old everything is, but hey, it's pretty darn old if you can't remember it. We also have this, water or, acid here that is, steaming. And this sort of gives off vibes that it's some sort of obstacle or something that could hurt us. Because typically, if you think about it, in real life, don't actually do this, but go boil a pot of water and see it bubbling, and then stick your hand in it, and then, tell me if it hurts or not, In this case, typically things that are hot or boiling or look like they are bad. And just for the sake of testing that, we can see, yeah, that's bad. And so, the Hollow Knight doesn't appear to be a very good swimmer. So we know for future reference that that is bad, and don't go in it. Very simple indications of hazards. Now here we see an enemy. Whoop. My bad. My main goal is to talk about this guy right here. So, this enemy doesn't give off major vibes of, at least in terms of facial and character design, doesn't really give off vibes of being an enemy. Compared to some of our other enemies that we've encountered this far, the enemy doesn't have any lit eyes or anything, or the lit pupils like other enemies did, which gave the glowing eyes typically means that there's something wrong with them. Here we just have an enemy that's kind of drooped over and has blank expressionless eyes like our character does. So just the character design itself doesn't give off bad vibes, but what does give off bad vibes is the orange cloud we see them walking around with. We know from dealing with other enemies that the orange goop or gas is a sign of an enemy. That's part of the infection in this game. So it's not necessarily the character design that gives away that that is particularly an enemy. It's more about it's less about the facial structure and more about the effects that it's giving off. So So going right, we have a pathway, and going left, we do not. I think there was a way to go through up here. Can we even reach that, though? I don't think we can reach that. We're close enough to smack it, but not to go up there. So again, it looks like that area is blocked off by us not having some sort of like dash or double jump or something to that effect. So once again, we are trapped into going one particular path. So we're gonna have this enemy here. Let's get rid of him real quick. So now we see this platform, and I'm immediately getting a bunch of different vibes off of it. So the first thing is that we can see that unlike some of these other platforms, these platforms are hanging on by a literal thread. And it's very clear in their design choice that they're as prevalent as the platform. So if you look at the background of where we are, you can see that it's faded. There's not as much depth to it. It's very clear we cannot interact with these rocks or grass in the background. But up here, when we step on the platform, you can see it shifts downward slightly as if we're pressing on it, as if it's being held up. And on top of that, its color scheme is more bright and has more of an outline, just like the platforms do as opposed to the background. So we can tell that there's a way that we can interact with it. And I think that it's a little obvious as to how we can interact with it. If I were to take a guess, we could smack it. So it looks like, so the game right here is introducing us to a new type of platform, one that we will have to knock down to progress. Now that one doesn't look like you needed to take that one down. It looks like that one, whether you had it up or you had it down, you would have been able to reach this location. I think that this was just a starting tutorial one, just to show you how it works. Now this one, however, this one looks like we'll actually need to knock it down, because I don't think we can reach this platform any other way. So we come up here, we knock it down, and now we can reach. So the game is showing us a new type of platform, and that we're going to need, at least in this area, that we're going to need to cut vines to lower platforms in order to progress. It's a different type of progression. Instead of needing an item, it takes a technique or an understanding of something. That enemy explodes, so we just have to be careful. And you notice about the design how we were talking about the lit pupils. When we defeat this enemy, as they're exploding, you can't see it there, as they're exploding, the infected eyes show up in their pupils. So I think that it's supposed to lure somewhat of a false sense of security until, it's too late and it's ready to explode. Here again, we see this platform. I'm not sure if in this instance it's necessary to knock it down, but we'll do it anyway. Grab the Geo. So here, I want to point out this specific layout. We have an enemy right directly underneath this falling platform, and the game is trying to tell us something here. And I think that we can all tell what the game is trying to have us do. So we can smush enemies with these platforms as well. So not only can they be used for traversing areas, they also seem to have a use as a way to dispatch enemies, which is a cool mechanic. You interacting with the environment to defeat enemies. I think that is definitely showing good game design. Here, as we come closer to the side, we have another platform to make fall, and that throws on the spikes, so we can progress that way. But this way, as you can see, there is some paper on the floor. Now, we learned from either the last time or the time before this that this paper and that humming is reflective of Cornifer. the map
The
maker,
hem noise kuchi.
the cartographer. And that means that we can finally get a map for this area. Isn't this a contrast from the crossroads? Such a humid, lively place. The roads twist and turn in the most wonderful ways. I've done my best to chart the area ahead, though I must admit some of the area's inhabitants prove to be quite a nuisance. Do you want to purchase a map? Absolutely. I ran into another traveler as I made my way down here. I tried to call out to her as she dashed past, but she barely even glanced in my direction. Not an appreciator of maps like you and I, obviously. And then he just repeats. So here we learned something interesting. So last time when we made it into this area, we discovered an NPC that looked a lot like us. And that character ran away from us as we got closer. Here, Cornifer is divulging a little bit of information about the character. The first thing to tell is that she's a girl. So obviously, because all of the creatures in the game are bugs, telling gender apart can be somewhat difficult. So because characters don't have the same facial and body proportions that humans normally do, it's harder to discern gender. So with that character, we saw there are ways we can take what design choices that are typically associated with women to try and associate her with as a female. But we'll do that when we get a closer look at her. Right now, if we didn't already have that understanding, we now know that she is a woman. And the text from Cornifer here that she dashed past without glancing and is not an appreciator of maps. It's supposed to be funny, like, hey, she doesn't like maps, just like us, but it's supposed to be more of a signal to she's not friendly. Obviously you can tell, the fact that he's saying, she dashed past us, she dashed past him, obviously she doesn't want to talk to anybody or be around anybody, but the not an appreciator of maps like you and I joke is supposed to be like, okay, this person is really not friendly. So the game is just trying to subtly hint to us that is going to be an obstacle. And they did a good job of showing her as an obstacle to begin with, presenting her and then having her quickly run away, having her become an objective. Now we know what to look out for, and we know a little bit more about our strange friend. So we can't progress this way, but maybe we can go up. No, we can't go up. I'm just wondering if there's a way to get up there at this point. We can't go this way, and we can't go this way, so I guess the only thing we can do is progress. So, we unlocked this spike thing down here, the platform that covers the spikes, so we can go through here. There's a way down, and let's see. This brings us back around over here. So we get back through here, okay. Just really want to explore and see if there's a way to get through there. Oh, there was! Okay. And as you can see, defeating that enemy knocked down that platform. Doesn't look like we're tiny enough to squeeze through there, but our character does look like they're flying, so that is a little funny. So we knocked down that platform, which allows us to get up here. And look, hey, we have another grub friend. So, by saving him, we get access to probably more rewards from the grub, from that old grub that we found in the crossroads. So maybe next time we have an opportunity, we'll go back and fetch some rewards from him. Alright, so the only way to progress now is to go down, so down we shall go. Here we have more enemies. We see that there's an enemy that's sneaking up on us, and in case you haven't already learned, the game is providing another opportunity to smush enemies. This doesn't look like you'd be able to make it back up if you didn't have this platform, so the game has given us a way to get back up on top of, doing that. And you see how easily they incentivize us to do that. They're like, okay, you learned how to smush enemies before, here's some more enemies you can smush. And, oh yeah, this platform helps you get back up. So it's a good way to try and force the player's eyes towards objectives by throwing enemies around them and such. Here's another platform we can collapse. So I just want to point out this real quick. This is very suspicious. Just to point out, it looks very threatening. And what gives off that vibe? So the first thing is that there are these rocks here, but they are shaped like teeth. You can see like this whole giant area right here is shaped almost like a narrow mouth, and it's filled with teeth. And in nature, when things are showing their fangs, when they're showing their teeth, it's a threat. It's a threat. It's a sign of hostility. That, oh, I'm baring my fangs because I'm going to attack you, or it's a warning. Don't come this way. On top of that, the area has some abnormally like bright lights coming from it, and you can see that there's these. It's kind of like these two contrasting ideas of the teeth being threatening, and that's kind of a bad sign. But typically, light is associated with, hey, come here. You know, this is good. This is safe. So it's a good way to take two different elements and draw you in. So here, the teeth are much larger. I want to point out real quick that like sound waves of vibrations were that happened when we first actually I don't think it did. It seemed very threatening. It threatened us, and like we actually got stunned in place there. So we can tell that whatever this is, it's very powerful. And it's also extremely threatening because not only are there fangs all around it, I don't know if this is a cave or if this is him, but this is, it's literally an entrance cave of claws. The Hunter. Tiny squib, your approach fearless. Are you a hunter like me? Do you feel the urge inside to stalk, to kill, to understand? Then take it, my journal. It will aid you. At first, the text may seem difficult to discern, but a learned hunter will come to understand of its words. Venture the depths of this land and slay its beasts. Prove yourselves worthy to be the mark of a hunter. Take in the hunter's journal. Press the select button to open the menu, then navigate to the journal pane. Defeat enemies to add new entries to the journal and decipher the hunter's notes. Little squib, you may overcome a few creatures, but you are only just the beginning. Don't delay, descend into the belly of this world and hunt down all life you find. So he's friendly in the loosest term of the word. So he is called the Hunter, and he's given us the Hunter's Journal. And this will give us this gives us some insight into the enemies we have been fighting thus far. And it looks like you have to kill a certain amount of them in order to better understand what they are. Crawlid, timid scavenger that crawls through the caverns looking for food, dull and pathetic, hardly worth killing. That's true. Flying predator, vengefly, gruzzer, tick-tick, aspid hunter, wandering husk, husk hornhead, leaping husk, husk bully, husk guard, false knight, and you can see here because there's only one of him, we get a more detailed description. Weak creatures love to steal the strength of others. Their lives are brief and fearful, and they yearn to have the power to dominate those who have dominated them. Which is kind of interesting to think about. So the false knight is clearly not, weak in any case. But when we think of a maggot, and that's what that white thing that we had inside the shell is, as indicated by the description here. So we have this weak maggot-like creature, and think about in real life. If you were to call somebody a maggot, like a drill sergeant in like some silly movie, typically you call somebody maggot to put them down. Like they're small, they're weak. And here, the false knight is being described as, okay, it's that maggot, but it's stolen the armor of some knight, and it has been living in fear and stole the power of whatever knight this is, you could interpret. So it stole his armor to gain power and, get that sort of power that, it was missing, and when it was like bullied and beaten around, I suppose you could say, that sort of idea. And that sort of brings up an interesting idea about the story of this game, because when we look and we talk about the husks, a husk is something that's like empty, and you can see in the descriptions that it says it's the remains of a bug animated by a strange force. So it's the infection, and it attacks uninfected creatures, indiscriminately. But here the false knight says it's not a husk or anything. It's a living creature. It's a maggot, and it's not animated by a strange force. It is driven mad by a strange force. So rather than reanimating a living creature, this is reanimating a dead creature. This is infecting a living creature. And on top of that, a husk doesn't have like a will or, its own sense of purpose. It's empty. It just, these empty husks attack indiscriminately uninfected creatures like a zombie would. Here, it's talking about the false knight, that it was beaten back and, bullied or dominated over. And it's saying that weak creatures love to steal the strength of others because they're fearful and they want to have power to dominate over others. Here we see a will or a desire coming from an enemy, as opposed to the husks, which don't have any will of their own, which is kind of a stark contrast and something interesting to know, that there are enemies in this game who aren't just mindless enemies. Obviously, the creature is whatever this infection is. It was driven mad by it, but even when it was driven mad by it, it still had like a will or a sense of purpose. It still wanted to have power, and wanting something is a sign of will. It's a sign of living, having a soul. Which makes it stand out from other enemies. Obviously, that's not something that really can be communicated through the character's design. It's more just about the story tidbit. But it is something interesting to think about, how the majority of enemies in this game appear to be, dead or infected in all sorts of different ways. And then there's a creature, a boss enemy, the most powerful enemy that we've fought thus far, appears to, even if it's distorted, even if it's somewhat diluted, it still has some sort of will to it, which I think is just interesting from a storytelling perspective. So there's definitely rewarding information for people who love the storytelling of games. And yeah, I just think that that's something very interesting to keep in mind of for now. Elder Baldur, Moss Creep, Moss Kin. So we can see what these moss creatures, Moss Creep, Moss Kin, and Volatile Moss Skin, it says it's a plant-like bug, which is kind of interesting to me insofar as, so the infection doesn't appear to discriminate against dead or living creatures, that are just bugs. It looks like it will also infect plants. So it's an all-encompassing sort of disease or infection. So, and then last in the Hunter's Log, it looks like we have this Shade, which is that enemy that we picked up after we died and held on to our souls and money. Echo of a previous life, defeat it to retake its power and become whole. Each of us leaves an imprint of something when we die, a stain on the world. I don't know how much longer this kingdom can bear the weight of so many past lives. I'm not sure what to take from that, but it's talking about, it's saying that when creatures die in this world, the thing that they leave behind is a stain. And we can see that from all of the dead husks and dead enemies that are turned into monsters by the infection. But that our Shade doesn't appear to be part of the infection. When we die, we leave behind the Shade, and it attacks us just as any kind of infected enemy would. But it doesn't appear to give off the same visual effects, that orange cloud or the goop that would come from an infected creature. So it's kind of saying that when things die, they leave something behind that's just bad, and that's typically the opposite of what we would expect. Typically in nature, what we would expect is that when something dies, its physical body returns to the earth, it nourishes the environment back, and things can grow off of that. Dead, fallen trees will typically give rise to things like fungus and stuff, because it'll feed off of the remains, and that's just how the cycle of life works. But here it's saying that whenever we die, we're leaving something bad behind, and it's saying, I don't know how much longer this kingdom can bear the weight of so many past lives. It almost seems like something, the sense of life and nourishment that is expected to return to the kingdom, that is expected to return to life, isn't coming back the way a typical cycle of nature would. So it makes things kind of interesting to look at. And sort of give us an understanding of this world. So when we kill things, there is a body that's left behind. We can see it. But whenever we rest at a bench, it appears that the enemies come back. So it looks like in this world, it's almost as if the game, through this, and through now looking back with hindsight with this information, we can see that the game is telling us a story about this kingdom that is dead, but it's not just a dead kingdom that's growing new life. It appears to be stuck in this. It seems like it's still decaying, it's still dying. Nothing is returning back to the earth to replenish life, almost, it seems. Instead, whenever something dies, it just becomes infected or it becomes hostile, and the cycle of life, I suppose, can't continue normally. That's my interpretation of it, anyway. But it's definitely something to think about. That was a large section, and that definitely was more or less about the game design aspect and more about the storytelling. But the storytelling helps give us an understanding of the world that we're playing in, if we're just analyzing the game itself and not taking a look at what it's trying to tell us, then what's the point of analyzing it, The more information we have about this world, the better. So, right there, I think that's a secret pathway. And two things give me that impression. The first is that when we first came through here, we smacked the vine to bring this platform down. Now that platform is covering a set of spikes. Typically, when we see these platforms when they're covering the spikes, that means you want to go on them. The other thing is that the faded black area that's to the left of it doesn't appear to have a solid thing there. It looks like it's just being covered by like a fog. It doesn't look like there's a physical wall there. And I don't see a reason for there to be a platform there unless it wants us to go this way. And what do you know, I'm right. It gives us another one so we can... Hello? So I guess you can't swipe up on them, you have to swipe directly at them? Okay. So we can come over here, grab that. Oh, and would you look at that? That led us right to another grub friend. You're free, little buddy. I was using the Vengeful Spirit spell there because I didn't want to get knocked into the water or acid, whatever it might be. So we found the hunter, and that gave us... So the hunter is... So, I didn't even think about the... I guess I said it in a more indirect way, so... The hunter serves a purpose as a storytelling tool. The game... Imagine if we had to sit here and, you know, have something explained to us about each and every individual enemy. Here, the Hunter's Log serves as a storytelling, the Hunter's Journal serves as a storytelling item, and the Hunter serves to give us, as an NPC, that information, so we can derive more information about the world and the enemies that we're fighting, without having to constantly go back and talk to an NPC, you know. Whenever we talk to somebody like Elderbug or the Coral, we're sitting down and we're taking in a bunch of information. We can't take in all of that information about every single enemy and sit there throughout the entire thing. So what the developers did is that, okay, you want to learn more about the game, here's a journal, you can learn about the enemies, you can learn about the world, you can learn about the environment. Oh. Come back, friend. So, let's think about what we were just shown there after I make sure that this thing doesn't kill me. So what we just saw is that our look-alike friend, she dropped from the ceiling, and then it looked like she had... Our weapon is called like a nail, if I remember correctly. Yeah, our weapon is referred to as a nail, and it looked like her weapon looked almost like a needle, like you would use to sew with. So what I just saw right there is that she dropped from the ceiling through a needle, and it looked like there was string attached at the end of the needle, and then she used it to almost like harpoon, or if you play Legend of Zelda, like hookshot her way to another side. So that tells us more about what... So I think it's clear that she's going... I mean, I don't think it's clear if she's going to be an obstacle, but she appears to be some sort of goal, and if she has a weapon, kind of like we do, it may be determined that she is like a boss or an enemy that we're going to have to fight. And we can see that the game is telling us, okay, when we meet her, she's going to be, you know, dashing around with this, needle. What I want to point out, thinking about it, is, so it looks like weapons in this game will be based on, like, regular, like, maybe household items. I don't know that for a fact, but we have an old nail, and then she has, like, a sewing needle. It's something interesting to think about in terms of we have atypical characters, you know, in terms of we're all playing as like bugs and shells and stuff like that, and items are called nails, and we saw that she had like a sewing needle, but even though it's not overt, you know, it doesn't look exact like this. Like this doesn't look like a nail. It looks like a sword. It almost looks like, from the way that it's shaped, it almost looks like a jousting, what do you call those, javelins? Spears? It's kind of what it looks like. So it doesn't look like a typical nail, and that needle that we saw didn't look 100% like a real-life needle, but it looks similar enough to where you can call it that. So it's just interesting to see what the weapon design choices in the game that you would have, because it's kind of like, you know, if bugs could have personality and talk and do things like people can, what would their weapons be? So we have a way to go down there, but the game was kind of leading us this way because of the direction that our friend went in. So I'm inclined to go that way. Yeah, because now we're looking at the map for the first time because I totally forgot to look at it. That appears to go down, but we don't have a clear, we don't have like the, we haven't reached a bench yet, so we don't know what's down there. I'm gonna pop down there just to see what's there. That's a sign that says a bench. Oh my goodness, we can save. Alright, so let's take a look at our map, now that it's filled in a little bit more. Okay, so you can see where we've gone so far. From the top right, that's where we entered into Forgotten Crossroads. That little bush area thing there was the hunter. And this appears to be a safe area. Now, we have this entire area down here that seems to be going in one direction, and then we have this uncharted area to the left. Our friends, she was heading to the left, so even though we went down here and managed to get a bench, I am inclined to go back towards her, if we can. There we see again what we were talking about earlier, that when we rest at a bench, all the enemies come back. So even though we can see that there are bodies being left behind by these enemies, the next time we rest at a bench or leave the area, they'll come back. Whoop. Okay, so there we can see that is a plant-like enemy. Looks like almost like a Venus flytrap. And we also get that Hunter's Journal symbol. When we killed it for the first time, we can see that it's there. Carnivorous plant that snaps at any creature that comes close. So we don't get any more insight as to the environment, but we can tell that instead of having just bug-like plants attack us, plant-like bugs rather, we'll have actual plants harming us as well. Woo! Look at that. That's a bigger version of those moss things. Timid creature that frightens away intruders by covering itself with huge clamps and moss. So it's just a bigger version of the moss creature. Okay. We'll say it was intimidating just because of how large it is and how quickly it jumped out. Oh, it got me. It's weird that the game. I will say that I'm all up for traps and surprises. I will say that it doesn't look like if there was more grass on the ground or moss on the ground, I would be more inclined to say, hey, that makes sense, like if it was like in an area over there, but here the terrain is mostly like solid rock, so it's kind of surprising to me that an enemy can jump out of there. Yeah, see, look at where it jumped out of. Hey, look, it's our friend. Hey, come back. There's an item down there. Oh, but the acid is there, we can't get it. So we'll have to come back for that. And our friend went this way. Oh. So the game is very clearly trying to lead us to her. So we're going to follow her. And hopefully not die on the way out. So, nope, I'm getting smacked around. So, it looks like this area is blocked off, but we know that these things can be used to purchase to unlock things. So instead of this toll machine unlocking a stag gate or something to that effect, stag station, we unlock a new bench, which brings us closer to our objective, which is cool, and we can see where we've been. So, yeah, we are heading up the path that we was kind of laid out for us already. And it looks like we are traveling upwards to meet our friend. So let's keep moving. Also want to point out that, again, the architecture here, this is clearly man-made, so it's a wonder of how old this place really is. We don't have a lot of room to defeat that enemy there, so we're going to use the spell there. No way to go through there, so we can go here. This looks suspicious to me. Yeah, that stood out a little too much. But it was pretty, it was decently hidden, I will say that. I healed unnecessarily there. I do not know why. Just instinct. I was about to say that looked like an enemy, so here we have like an encounter. Oh, that was a lot shorter than I expected that to be. Huh, okay. Well, it looked like the game tried to trap us in with an enemy. That died a lot faster than I expected it to. Okay. So it looked like he had like a nail like we did and a shield, but he died too fast enough to use anything. Okay. Listen, I'm all up for beating the enemy first. So we have gone upwards, and I'm not sure if we're going the right way for here, but we've gone upwards and we appear to be back in like the caves, but on the map we still show up, so it looks like this is still part of the area, but it's not part of the forest area. It's interesting how Greenpath still considers this stony area. That friend looks like us. We should try and help him. These enemies are really fast. I was expecting more. Interesting, though. Interesting. So before we go check to see if he's alive, Vengeful Fly King. Patriarch of a vengeful colony swoops at adventure. So it's just a bigger version of this. Okay. What do you think you're doing? You dared to come between me and my prey. Is it a habit of yours to scurry about getting in the way and causing bother? Well, so this guy doesn't appear to be, very friendly. We just saved his life. He was very clearly getting eaten, and, he's, not very grateful. Know this, cur. I am Zote the Mighty, a knight of great renown. Cross me again, and you'll find out why my weapon is called the Life Ender. What are you still bothering me for? I'm a knight. I'm not interested in your childish games. I need my rest. Begone, lest I draw my nail. So, here his character design is exactly like us, which I think is interesting, almost. There are very key differences, though. So let's think about the characters that we've seen thus far that reflect sort of this look. We have the strange girl that has been flying around and leading us around. And she looks like a taller version of us. Her head is longer this way. She still has that sort of almost like blank expression like we do. Here we run into Zote the Mighty, and what's different about him is that the first thing is that he talks. We don't know if the girl can talk yet, but he talks. And he also has, unlike the girl or our character, he has a facial expression. Like, he looks tired. He looks old and tired. and we can get that from the fact that he has like a ring or wrinkle underneath both of his eyes. He's slouched back and is lower down, so he's kind of like hunched over, like it takes effort to keep him up. And he also looks very like, because his eyes aren't wide open, they're like half cut off towards the bottom. So it's more like a half circle of an eye. And the way we associate that is we associate this with kind of like a whatever face, like you're just sitting there and you don't have any sort of expression. He almost looks like more annoyed. So just based on like he has this specific posture of being hunched over, he looks annoyed. His character talks as if, like he is annoyed, like, oh my god, like how dare you, like he's like, how dare you millennials do this, So he definitely gives off that vibe. So I mean, I'm always happy to save people, but he doesn't appear to be very, very friendly. And he's willing to hurt us for no reason. So I'm just gonna walk away. You're welcome. Huh, okay, so we had to go through the caves, I suppose, to get down here? Because now the path is turning, green and life and full of grass again, so now we're back down here. So I guess the game wanted us to diverge and meet. It's very strange to me that they would introduce a new character right before, they're leading us on. They're like, hey, you gotta follow this one girl. She's leading you towards somewhere. But then they're like, oh, but before that you have to go and save this guy. Yeah, so this guy has a sword, has a nail, and a shield, and it looks like he blocks our, try and block our attacks. So, and he also shoots stuff at us. So it looks like we have to like hit, we have to like bait out an attack from him first. And I say him because it looks like he has some sort of beard. That's just the way his character communicates. And look, here we have another one next to a giant Geo supply. I would like to collect this stuff if you would let me live. Thank you. Oh, we got a decent chunk of geo from that. I did want to see what was up there, because I missed a jump over here. There's a hidden pathway. And what's this? The green children walked from the dream unto these lands. Here we shall now wait, patient for the call to return. The green children walked from the dream unto these lands. Here we shall wait, patient for the call to return. I don't really know what that means. At least from a new player perspective, it's hard to say what that means. So they're saying that this is called, so this area is called the Greenpath. And it's saying the green children walked from the dream unto these lands. We don't know what the dream is, but we can associate that if this is Greenpath and the green children walked from here, that the green children would be the inhabitants of this place. And it looks like they're waiting for some sort of call to return to their dream, quote unquote. I think you're gonna have a hard time getting people to come back because they're all infected, friend. What I do want to note about these warrior enemies is that they don't. Never mind. I was about to say they don't show off signs of infection, but when they die, they explode. We save another grub friend. So they don't give off completely visible signs, but when they hit, they explode with the infection. Oh, there was another, there were more orphans over here. I completely missed them. So where are we here? So the map is leading us to go to the left, so I am inclined to follow that. Except not go that way, that's going to lead us back to where we were. We want to go a little bit further down. Because otherwise we're just going to go back in a circle to where we were originally. Oh, another one of these things. We'll just leave him be. Oh, looks like there's also a stag station. So, stag station has a safety point, so I would like to go there first. Map updated, so we can take a look. So that connects back towards the bottom where we were originally. We can buy the stag station. And I'm just curious to see what our friend says now. This place has changed much since I last saw it. The greenery grows so wild, the station looks like to be consumed by it. Yeah, so it just has our attention. So it looks like he's familiar with the stagways, but he sees that they're overrun. Not much interest, but at least we unlocked a way to travel back when we want to. So that allows us to come back here and get items later. I'm gonna point out that the music just stopped, and that's usually not a super good tell. So, without going any further, we can now get a much better look of our friend here. So you can see that we have, again, we were talking about the expressionless look. She is much like taller, it looks like, so our character is more spread out to the side, so our head kind of looks like a rounded square, and our cloak or cape or whatever it is that we're wearing tends to go off to the side. Here, her character design has it so she's taller and more like slender, and that's typically design choice, like typically thinner, skinnier, taller. That's typically like more choices, game design choices you take with female characters. On top of that, the cloak that she's wearing, almost like if you were to take it, or like if you were to like take that sprite and specifically look at it, it would look almost like a dress or a skirt. So you can see how it comes off less like a cloak and more kind of like a dress or a skirt or something to that effect. But it is very much a cloak. On top of that, her weapon is drawn, and typically when you have, when knives out, that's not, it's not a sign of friendliness. And on top of that, it looks like slightly to the left of her, there's another version of us that has a nail impaled in it. So if I had to take a wild guess, this is going to be a boss fight. Come no closer, ghost. That's interesting. I'm going to point out that she calls us a ghost, and there is a shade inside of us, so that's something to keep in mind. I've seen you creeping through the undergrowth stalking me. I guess technically she didn't tell us to follow her. This old kingdom, a terrible thing awakens. I can smell it in the air. That would be the infection that we've been talking about. I know what you are. I know what you tried to do. I can't allow it. It's interesting. So she has an idea of why we're here, but we don't. I kind of wish I knew why I was here. Oh, yep, and there's the boss fight. So her name appears to be Hornet. And we also learned that she can talk. So definitely, like I was saying, she definitely appears to be using that needle of hers to dash around, and she throws it at us. The needle or thread that she has is also being used like a whip or like a hook shot. Yeah, so that when she throws that comes back. Whoop! Taking way too much damage here. She's very fast, very agile. Unlike many of the other enemies, that we've seen. So she has a lot of personality. She's fast, she's strong, you know, she definitely gives up a lot of different vibes. She does compare to us in that regard, and how we are fast, we're strong. So we're definitely setting ourselves apart here, between her and the environment and the enemies. And I like how the game makes it so that when you deal a certain amount of damage, you do get a break to heal. That way you're not just stuck. Oh, she's gone. Goodbye. Oh, so that was Hornet. So everything we sort of interpreted about her came about. So there's an item here, and what do we have here? The Moth Wing Cloak. Press RT to dash forward. Use the cloak to dash quickly along the ground or through the air. Oh, would you look at... Would it seek to break the seals? They cannot be undone. They must be undone. Let us sleep, little shadow. Return to your darkness. Allow us our peace. Okay, so I think we just learned what our objective is. So Hornet said that it knows what we intend to do and she can't allow it to happen. Immediately after that, we're greeted with voices that say the seals... It's sort of like contradictory. It says the seals must be broken. Like, does it intend to break the seals? The seals must be broken. No, they must not be broken. It almost was like a conversation or an argument. It's like, should we let it break the seals? Should we not? And we also saw 3 ghosts, spirits, tell us to go back to sleep, return to your darkness. So the shade was dark, and Hornet called us a ghost. So I wonder if it's just trying to, so it's clear that whatever Hornet and those 3 things are, Hornet doesn't want us to break the seals because it says that it knows what we want to do, and because the game tells us immediately after we meet Hornet, that's what we can assume that Hornet's talking about, at least for the time being. So the game is saying, okay, Hornet doesn't want us to break the seals. Then the 3 spirits show up, and they introduce us to the idea of whatever these seals are. Thinking about it, they might be the seals on that door that we saw at the beginning of the game. We saw like 3 faces. Maybe those were the 3 faces or masks of the enemies that we encountered, of the spirits we encountered. And it looked like there was a discussion going between them, because why would the game wouldn't say they must be undone, they cannot be undone, because they wouldn't, because the game would be guiding us, right? They'd be saying, okay, the seals must be undone here. Like if we were to go like a whole like movie or video game route of like the chosen one, you know, like you are the one who must break the seals. They wouldn't give us 2 contradictory pieces of information unless there was some sort of like discussion or argument, and it looked like those 3 creatures that we saw weren't all on the same page. It seemed to me like they're saying, okay, one of them believes that, okay, the seals must be undone, we have to break them. The other one's like, no, we can't, we absolutely cannot do that. And then the third one's just like, just put them back to sleep. So we have been given an objective very slightly by saying that, without explicitly being told, because the spirits just told us to go back to sleep, the game is now telling us, okay, your goal is to break the 3 seals. And the seals, we can assume, are on that door in the Black Temple. Black Temple of the Egg, or Temple of the Black Egg. On top of that, now that we've beaten Hornet, we have unlocked an ability, and it looks like we now can dash. So if you remember, there were several areas before, in the Forgotten Crossroads, even here in Greenpath, where we couldn't reach certain platforms, and now we should be able to reach them, if at least over a horizontal gap. and be able to reach new objectives and new things. So with that being said, I think that is enough action-packed adventure for one day. As usual, there'll be an assignment to go along with this video, asking about your thoughts and interpretations on everything. I will see you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of your week.